Hi everyone and welcome. I'm Diane and my passion is painting and creating nature-inspired watercolours in my studio, which are easy for you to do too. I share all my paintings with you on YouTube, and on our website dianeanton.com you can find free downloadable sketches for all the videos to help you make the most of your painting journey. And if you'd like a little bit more, we also have channel memberships with loads of perks for you to enjoy. So welcome on board. Click subscribe and turn on notifications, and let's learn to paint watercolour. Hi everyone, Diane here, welcome to my studio. Today I thought we would have a go at painting some trees, well at least one tree anyway. I'm not going to do this in a sort of traditional and this is how you do it kind of way. I'm going to do it as a sort of, let's say a sort of heartfelt abstraction perhaps of the essence of tree. So what we're going to start with is a loose background, and then on top of that I'm going to put some imaginative branches, and then on top of that probably we might place some birds into the trees amongst the branches. So we'll see how that goes. So if you're interested, follow along and you can paint along with me. What I've got here is my paper, which is going to be a sheet from this Etcher block, not pad, block of paper. Oh, I read the funniest thing on Amazon the other day. Somebody had bought one of these and had said, "This paper is absolutely useless. It's glued into one solid block and you can't separate the pages at all." And I'm so cross because it's so disappointing. I'm like, yes, right. Well, it's not. Each page is separate from the next, and you just slide something sharp or something blunt. Like this is a bone folder. Works very well. If you insert the bone folder in there and then just slide it right round, and you can separate the top page off from the rest. But meanwhile, while you're painting on it, because it's stuck all the way around, and I know I've said this 100 times, but there's always somebody who comes new to this concept watching one of these videos, so I'm sorry, I apologize if you've heard it all before. But this holds the paper nice and flat, and it won't warp or buckle while you're painting on it. The alternative is to use just an ordinary sheet of paper and to tape it around the outside with washi tape or builder's tape. Or if you feel like you're going to do something special, you can actually stretch the paper using water and all that. And I've got a video on that if you're interested. But for the purposes of this kind of relaxing thing, we don't need to do any of that. So that's my paper. And then it doesn't have to be Etcher, by the way. Loads and loads and loads of people make blocks nowadays, and you can be bought for any price. And I tell you what, we're now able to offer 10% discount on anything that you buy from Meeden. Meeden is the company, Chinese, and they make these palettes and lots of other things as well. They have a good range of ceramic palettes, including big ones, and I'll be able to show you those at some point in the near future. But even as of now, if you go along to their website, and I'll put the information in the description below, and you type in where it says, have you got a code, Diane10 will give you 10% off your price, and it'll also give us a small commission as well of anything you buy from them direct. And they do have distribution warehouses in every country, so it's not going to come from China. They've got warehouses in America and in France and Germany and Spain and Italy and England and everywhere. They've invaded the whole world. But their palettes are very good. I really like this. It's very useful. You can put a Kuretake pan in these rectangular, they fit in there. A Kuretake one will fit, and then you can mix and so on and so forth. Anyway, there's endless ways in which you can use a palette like this. It's just up to you and your imagination. So that's Meeden, M-E-E-D-E-N, who have decided they would like to work with us. And, well, not exactly work with us, but they would like us to mention their products. And I don't mind mentioning their products because they're good. Every little helps. Then I've got my my big palette. I call this my big palette. This is my traditional palette, and I learnt how to do it like this from the late, great Ron Ranson, who in 1984 wrote a book. I'll just show you which book it was. that set me really on the path to watercolour painting. This was watercolour painting by Ron Ranson, 1984. This book came out, let me see, 1984. I was 30. And yeah, I think this is almost all in black and white. In those days, we weren't inundated with colour, and we learned how to paint trees in this traditional way, which we can and will address at some point, perhaps. That's what I did this morning. And if you go to Facebook, you'll see a little sketch of a tree, which I did using his technique. Why am I talking about him? Because that's where I started with this morning. And this also, you can still buy this book. And I would heartily recommend it if you like to read about how to paint. This is a little bit of a masculine kind of approach, reading about how to paint, but I don't know, it appeals to me. And he talks about everything that we use nowadays. It's not out of date at all. Talks about hairdryers and white paint and sponges and masking fluid and stencils and salt and spatter and everything, painting knives, all the things that we talk about in our watercolour journey. He addresses in this book in detail, and he knew what he was doing. He used to teach in England, and also he was very well known in, I think it was the place called Bend in Oregon, is it? And I think they have watercolour schools there, and he used to go there every year and teach for years. Unfortunately, he passed away some years ago now, I think in about 2000 and something. But I do recommend his books if you are in the slightest bit interested in the history of watercolour painting over the years and all the beautiful things that we used to do, which have kind of gone down the toilet since modern watercolour came in. Nobody bothers anymore to learn how, well, except for Paul Clark, of course. He's pretty good. And this kind of painting is lovely, isn't it? Very restful, very beautiful. Not what you'd call realism. It's not realistic, but nice to look at, I think. And I've got his signature here somewhere too, since we're doing this. What was it? Was it this one? I went on a course with him a couple of times. And that's Ron. Yeah, that's Ron. He was blind in one eye. Can you believe it? Blind in one eye, and yet he still wrote all these books. And this book changed the world of watercolour, definitely, by introducing this idea of painting with a hake brush. There we are, there's his signature. Ron Ranson to Diane, April 2004. So I bought this book. He introduced this brush, the hake or hake, which is a Japanese or Chinese brush. And when we started to paint with this brush, it made a huge difference, because up until then, we'd painted with little ones like this, which we do a lot of, don't we, these days in these tutorials. But when I can bring myself to break out of the framework of the everyday modern watercolour, then this is something I usually turn to as a support for my painting. So that works well on a brush, on a palette this size. You need plenty of space if you're going to mix and mingle with this brush. So that's why he suggested, that's where we started. He suggested using a big tray like this, which is about 18 inches wide, about 15 inches high or whatever, it's 15 by 18. And you can buy these reasonably cheaply on Amazon, and I'm sure they have them even cheaper still in the dollar stores. Totally recommend this idea for when you're doing bigger paintings or landscape paintings, or, you know, as long as you've got the space to put it on your table, this is great. And it can go away in a drawer when you're not using it, if you've got a drawer that's big enough to take it, that is, obviously. And on here, I've laid out my palette. This is the equivalent of what we were talking about the other day. This swatch card shows it. I have, these are actually not Paul Rubens, and they're not Kuretake colours. These are an assortment of Old Holland, De La Rowney, Winsor & Newton, Daniel Smith, Van Gogh, That's about it, I think. Oh, maybe a Sennelier in there. There's just all different makes, just to show that you can mix and mingle different makes. Doesn't make any difference. They all go together. You don't have to, stick to one brand. And on here, I've got basically this palette laid out, with the exception of this color and a couple of the yellows, because that's not particularly useful. I don't possess that, but all the others I do have in tubes. And that's what I put here. Doesn't mean to say I'm going to use all of those today. Probably won't, because we're going to paint a tree. So these are the brushes we're going to use. The hake, like I said, I might use the squirrel brush. This one. This is these are not animal free. This is hog hair, I believe. This is squirrel hair. I have had these brushes for a very long time, and the animals that gave their hair for this are long gone. The rest of these are synthetic. This is nylon, imitation sable. This is a Pro Art brush. They're a very good brand, come from England, and these ones are Drawwell from Japan. All the information's in the description below the video if you wish to purchase any of those. And we're going to do a painting a little bit like this. There's a nice moody forest scene, practicing trees. I'll put this over here. And I need now to just move this over here and put this here. And I've already managed to put a blob of green paint on there, but never mind. And I'm just going to put this onto a wide view so that you can see both the palette and the paper. It should be okay like that. Paper looks quite small now all of a sudden, doesn't it? Okay, so let's sit down. Now, to make this painting, I need to paint a background, and it's going to be a light green in the middle, and then around the outside is going to be darker. And I'm going to use a mixture of greens. And I'm thinking that this paper looks quite small to use the hake. I don't think I'll use the hake brush, the big one. I'm going to use the small, they call it petit gris squirrel hair brush, but you could use anything. And for the center, I want a light yellowish turquoisey sort of color. So I've pulled out some turquoise into the palette like that. And we can start by brushing that in the middle here, just using loose strokes. And we can incorporate that green just by sort of rubbing it a little bit in like that. And then I might pick up a little bit of lemon yellow, and because the light is in the center of this forest. And we'll put some of that around and about. And then maybe we'll switch to a slightly warmer yellow, and this is looks like yellow ochre. And we'll put some of that here and some of it there. And then we might pick up some quinacridone gold, which is even more warm. And we might put some of that around and about. And then I'm going to switch back to the turquoise, but with a little bit of quinacridone in it. So that makes it into a nice light green. And just sort of dancing the brush here and there over the paper. You can choose whatever colours you want, and whatever you do choose, it's going to come out differently from mine for sure. This is turquoise blue, which means I think it's got phthalo in it. So if you wanted to make that a bit darker, you can just pick up a bit of phthalo blue and mix that in. And it'll just darken it down and make it a little bit more greenish, a little bit more quinacridone in it, make it darker still. And don't blend the colours in, and don't mix them thoroughly if you want it to look lively. Leave gaps, not gaps on the paper, but gaps in the colour. So you want it to, because it will for sure blend in, the colours will move, but so you don't want to make a kind of, you know, like you're painting a wall or something. You don't want to do that. You just dance things in and keep it varied and put a little bit more, perhaps of the darker blues down the bottom here. Maybe a little bit more phthalo around the edges. And then we can pop some quinacridone on top of that. A little bit more turquoise. As I said, I'm using etcher paper, and I've just hit an area on here where the sizing is uneven and the paint has left lines. Can you see that? It won't matter for this painting because I'm going to go over the top of that. But that just goes to show there's nothing wrong with cellulose paper, but it does need to have even sizing. And I've noticed this before with this etcher. And maybe that's why it's not available at the moment on Amazon. It seems to have gone off the market, and perhaps it could be that that's because they've had a quality control problem. I don't know, but there we are. So that's our background. We've got a nice area of light coming through the trees. We've got lots of greens around the outside. And when that's dry, I'm going to paint a nice chunky branch network on the front there, and then we'll put some birds in it. Okay, so before we carry on with this is the background now. It's completely dry. And you can see it's got lots of nice graduations of colour in it because we used a transparent paint. But before I carry on, I'm going to show you a little bit how I'm going to do some of the branches using this swordliner, which is a bit like a rigger, but it's longer, and it has a kind of tapered long hair section here. And the way this can be used, it used to be used, it was invented to draw lines along the sides of vehicles and things like that. And you could draw a long straight line. Straight, if you had a steady hand, you could do a straight line. So if you want to, you can vary the thickness by how hard you press. So you can draw a straight line, very fine, like that. And if you take it and from the art point of view, you can use it slightly on its side, so you can get a much broader line like this, which can be useful. You can also do swirly shapes like this, and you can use the very point of it to draw very fine circles if you want, if you want to do a spiral or something. But it's particularly useful for doing branches where you can just use the point and just kind of skate across the paper using the point like that. It's easier to practice for yourself, to watch and to see. You can use it for stems on plants as well as branches. You can use it for grasses, just flicking with the very end like this. You can use it for dots, spattering like that. I think probably I most commonly use it for what I call sort of calligraphic marks, where I would sort of just dance around the page in a random kind of way. And you can do all sorts of splishy, splashy things and so on and so forth. Wide and thin. You could probably write with it if you were clever enough. Anyway, so that is a script liner or sword liner. See why it's called a script liner. So we're going to use that for some of the branches, probably. So it started to rain again. I need to cheer myself up with a cup of hot chocolate. So I've been thinking about this while I was having lunch, and my original, I painted the tree trunk in brown, but I'm thinking I'm not going to paint the tree trunk in brown. I'm probably going to do it in green. So probably not that colour green, but a dark green. So I'm looking at the Kuretake colours at the moment and thinking to myself, you know what, I don't want to think too hard about this. I just want a dark colour. And then I'm going to start in the middle here, and I'm just going to begin. And I'll probably have to pick up more colour with almost every stroke. So I'll just do that. Change the colour every time I go in to get more paint. Now, there's one thing that my friend Ron Ranson used to say about branches, which was they get thinner as you go along. They don't ever get thicker. They might look as if they do, because maybe perspective is getting in the way, but they actually don't. So I'm going to try to stick to that rule. And if you want to start from the thinnest and go thicker, rather than starting from the thickest and go thinner, you can do it that way too. So starting here, making sure it always goes thinner, or starting up here and making sure it always goes thicker. And you'll notice that if you do stick to that, it does look better. And the thing with branches is you have to try to make them look irregular, which is not always easy. And these are green or bluish green, and I'm just more or less randomly choosing the colours. And we can have them coming right to the edge of the paper, I suppose. No reason why not. And so you could call this a tree of life if you wanted to. So I'm going to do fairly big branches coming out to a certain point, and then when I think I've got enough, I will go to the liner, sword liner. And it's a good idea to make sure that they cross over one another sometimes, and probably varying the colour. And if you feel that your trunk has got too narrow, you can always make it fatter. Remembering to make the branches fatter too. And as you practice this, you'll get better at it. I haven't painted a tree for a long time. They tend to have kind of angular joints, so that's what makes it a little bit harder, I think, because if you're trying to make it random, you're trying to make them smoothly getting thinner. Looks like a pair of legs there. So you're trying to do two things at once, trying to make them thicker, thinner at the ends, but smooth and jagged, which is, it's kind of impossible, really. Okay, so maybe we need one going up here. Okay, maybe I'll switch to the rigger or the swordliner now. And just do a few smaller ones using quite a dark green. Takes a little bit of concentration, this, so I'm not going to be telling too many jokes at this point. It's like everything else, you'll find your own way of doing these things, and my purpose here is just to give you ideas for doing things. I would never say there's only one way of doing something, and I won't be accused of that. I have never, in fact, that makes me think of something that I can reminisce about. I remember when I was living in Germany in the 80s, just after the Berlin Wall had come down, I was teaching English to, I think I might have mentioned this before, to German businessmen in Meersburg on Lake Constance, and a company that I was working for was called, what was it called? SMT? No. I can't remember. Anyway, it doesn't matter, irrelevant. They made engines for planes and ships and yachts and things like that. Anyway, irrelevant. They wanted to learn English. I don't know why. And I was teaching them English. And one of the problems that I came across was that the Germans wanted to know what the right answer was. How do you say such and such? And I used to say, well, there's more than one way of saying that. You could say so-and-so, or you could say such and such. And I would give them options, and they would say, no, there must be a right way to say, you know, my friend lives in Frankfurt and I am going to visit him next week. And I would say, well, yes, you could say my friend lives in Frankfurt and I'm going to visit him next week. But you could also say, I have a friend who lives in Frankfurt and I'm planning to visit him next week, or I am thinking about, I mean, just loads of different ways, aren't there, of saying the same thing. They didn't like that. They wanted to be told the right way to say something. There is no right way. There's just lots of different ways, I would say. I didn't like that at all. But it's true. There's more than one way of doing most things. Okay, so I don't know how this is going to turn out, but this is jolly good practice for using a rigger. And it doesn't matter how it turns out because it's just practice of using a rigger. And as you do this, you'll think, oh, that looks like a jolly nice little branchlet. I'm starting to get the hang of this, you might say. And then you get to a certain point and you think, oh yeah, you know what, now I think I need to start putting some leaves on. So then you have another decision to make. Am I going to paint large areas of leaf with a big brush, or am I going to paint individual leaves? I think not. So I think probably what I might do, I don't know how this is going to work, and if you don't see this video, it's because it didn't work. I'm going to use this half-broken hake brush, and I'm going to pick up some green, some lighter green, and I'm going to try dabbing that on. And then I might just change the colour a little bit. Make it a bit darker over the side. And have some nice runs here because it's not dry. So I'm just putting clusters and clumps of foliage onto the branches. And because it's not winter, obviously, there are branches everywhere. Leaves everywhere on all the branches. And when you've done this, you can then, if you want, add more twigs and some darker browns. Don't want to hide all the background light, so we'll keep it fairly, I'm looking out the window at my oak tree in the garden while I'm doing this to get myself a little bit of, reality here. And then I'm going to just find some darker green, mix that into the little tray that I've got there, which I hope you can see. Yes. And then I'm going to just drop in some dabs of that. Not particularly in any particular place, because what's going to happen, I'm going into the wet paint. What I hope is going to happen, despite the fact that this paper is less than obliging, I'm hoping it's going to all spread nicely. So now we have to let that do its thing and, dry. And then we'll put some birds into the gaps, I think. Now, again, you have a choice here as to what you do. And I've been thinking about this, and I am going to, I think, do something that always used to make me laugh when people used to say, for goodness sake, when you're painting a tree, don't try to paint every leaf. And I used to think, who on earth would want to do that? Well, I've decided that that's what I'm going to try to do here. So I've picked up this number 5 brush, and I'm going to paint using the lovely characteristic of the Kuretake paints, which is the opacity. And I'm going to come into the light background that I've got, which doesn't seem to me to go quite far enough. And I'm going to paint in opaque leaves, basically all over the whole thing to finish off this design. And I've mixed, I think, something that's like phthalo blue with some olive green or phthalo green or whatever it is, some dark bluish green colours anyway, it doesn't matter what they are. You'll have to just practice and find out. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to change the colour now to slightly lighter green. And we are going to, especially starting with the ends of the branches, and I'm going to put in as many as I think we need. And this is going to embellish the ends of these twigs in a sort of semi-graphic kind of way, because to me they look unfinished the way I've painted them. So rather than saying to myself, oh well, I don't like what I did there, I'm going to take it further until I do like what I've done. It's nice when you put a dark leaf on top of the nice light background. And I think you can see already it's starting to make more sense. And I'm going to use the nice thick paint, which I'm hoping isn't going to run, to go here, where, again, there is a problem with the sizing on the paper. It's running. It did this before when we did one of these paintings, and I'm probably starting to get a little bit irritated with this particular block of paper, so probably won't use it again. This would be a lovely meditative process to do in front of the television, or I know there's a few ladies who watch the channel who are unfortunately bedridden or have to spend a lot of time in bed, unable to stay up all day, or not very mobile, which I'm sorry to hear about. It must be very difficult. I can imagine having been ill myself like that and hated it. So I'm sure, you don't have any choice when that sort of thing happens to you, do you? You have to put up with it. You have to do something to occupy yourself. And if our videos are helpful, then I'm very glad about that. So I'm basically putting these dark little leaves on the ends of the branches where the birds wouldn't sit, right? Because I was thinking of putting some birds on here. I don't know if I will in the end, we'll see. And it doesn't matter what colour you do the leaves, just a variety, because it looks pretty much the same at the end of the day. Oops. I think that's a fly. Come on. Don't know where that came from. Okay. So you get to this point and you start to think, oh, I could turn this into more of a whimsical thing. You know, you could start putting other embellishments on in pen, white pen, for example. Could do something with the leaves like that, or you could ink in some black. Oh, I know what I want. This one, maybe. It's very confusing. This has a blue case because you think it's going to be blue, and it isn't. You could put in some lines and join some of the leaves to the twigs a little bit more using the pen where they don't join very well, like that. And you could enhance the actual twigs themselves by going over with the pen, or you could do some outlines of leaves to be, what's the word, complementary to the ones, or you could go over the outside edge of ones which don't look terribly good shape, or you could use white and do veins. Or you could do none of the above. I don't want to smudge it. I think that could look quite good to have some empty ones scattered around. If you know what I mean. Yeah, it kind of works. Not quite sure why, but it does. I suppose there's probably rules about this in art. And you could keep going until you built up quite a depth, because I think the ones that are empty, these little leaves with no colour, you could add colour to them, of course, but that it gives a certain amount of recession. And if you go sort of behind, because the pen line, if you came behind like that, that will automatically give you a sense of distance a little bit. So you could carry on doing that for a long time. And I'm going to stop at some point. You can also use the pen to improve the shape of your branches as well, like that, and to sort of straighten out some of your shady bits and so on. And I think I might now put some birds in, and I think I'm going to do them with the pen. So we can start with the legs. It's a good idea sometimes, and then it's always a bit nerve-wracking. Then we'll colour him in, and I think I might make him yellow, perhaps. Not sure if that's going to show up enough. The thing is, if you start with yellow, then if it's not dark enough, you can always go over the top, can't you? And we could do one here. And we could have one up here. And we could just carry on as long as we wanted to with our little birdies. Hiding them, basically, hiding them in the branches. And if they don't work out quite right, doesn't matter. I think I'll just colour them in. Let's make one of them orange. When they're dry, they come back and finish their little bodies, make him a bit more orangey, I think. This one, they look like oranges now. Probably need one up here, don't we, to balance it off. Okay, well that'll do for them. So there we are. I think we could leave it there. It's possible that I might consider finding a biggish brush and putting a little bit more, maybe some, I don't know, this might be a bit risky, but this is the area where it was really awful, the sizing. So it might not be a good idea, but anyway, I've done it now. And we could have a few grasses if we wanted to. Probably best not to. I'm committed now. Some nice darks down here. Never did anyone any harm. And I don't know whether we feel that, you know, the tree trunk could do with some light in it. I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think so. I think we'll leave that solid green like that. And I think we'll probably call that done for the time being. And yeah, so there we are. That is an exercise in using brushes, different brushes, the swordliner, this one, and the hake, this one, and putting in a variegated wash to start with, and then building up using the brushes and developing brush control using two different kinds of paints, my normal tube ones on a big palette and the Kuretake ones on a small palette. You could have used these right from the start, as we have done in the past. And I hope you enjoyed that. And if you did, give us a like and subscribe and turn on notifications. And I will see you again soon. So bye now, everybody. Bye-bye.